biggest trap that we've found is that organizations will automate their dysfunction rather than eliminate the dysfunction. That's not what happens. Automation replicates that dysfunction faster and faster.
Hello everybody, I'm Jared.
Hi, I'm Melinda.
And welcome back to The Secret Life of Inventory. This is a show where we dive deep into the unseen world of inventory management, revealing the hidden mysteries that help businesses like yours optimize their workflow and succeed.
Today, our guest is an industry leader in automation strategy and operational transformation. Let's welcome Dave Kilzer, the founding partner at Strategic Transformation Advisors.
Dave helps businesses improve their warehouse automation, streamline processes, and plan smarter long-term technology strategies. Recently, he's been focusing on AI-enabled humanoid robotics and what that means for the future of operations.
With humanoids projected to cost under $40K and operate under $8 an hour by 2028 to 2030, leaders are forced to rethink their automation investments. So, if you're looking to future-proof your operations, stay tuned. In this episode, we'll break down common automation traps, explore what the future of humanoid fulfillment looks like, and introduce the HRQ, which is a simple 1 to 10 scoring framework for evaluating automation next to traditional ROI.
Yes. So I'm really excited for this conversation. I love me some robots. So thank you again, Dave, for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here and to join this conversation with you.
Okay, Dave, we got a lot to dive into today. So we're going to kind of start off by setting the stage a little bit. Obviously, there has been a huge amount of hype when it comes to AI, automation, inventory systems, and kind of how these things are kind of working together.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, of course, there are, some of these projects maybe aren't giving as much ROI or maybe not the results that leadership is expecting right away. So in your perspective, what does the world of automation look like right now in today's world? And, what are some things that companies are getting really excited about and where are they getting stuck?
There's a fascinating paradox that's going on today in automation and industry. Mm-hmm. And this includes both manufacturing and distribution. Mm-hmm. And that paradox is the rapid spend rate that's going on right now in terms of the investments that are made in capital equipment to do high-speed sortation, to do the automated moves of material between whether it's conveyors or automated mobile robots. There is a great deal of investment going on. But the paradox there is that no one's looking beyond what is there today in terms of the automation that is available from the sales guy that's knocking on their door or what they saw at the last Modex or ProMat or whatever trade show that they went to. So they're not looking beyond that as to what's coming, what's the next wave behind it. Mm-hmm. And the wave behind it, which is AI-enabled humanoid robotics, is going to be such a dramatic shift in terms of the capabilities that it brings to those operating environments that it's going to reset what the baseline is for automation and how it can be deployed in manufacturing and distribution operations. Mm-hmm. So the paradox is that by making those investments today, they may be precluding or building in barriers to the next generation. And those barriers can take multiple forms. One of the critical forms is capital is a scarce resource. Mm-hmm. They may be capital limited. They deploy all their capital and it's got a 10 to 15 year payback before they really accumulate the resources to go to the next generational change. Mm-hmm. And they've already spent their money, if you will.
Right. So
they're locked in it. It's still depreciating asset. Right. So they're not financially available resources to implement the next generation of automation. Right. And that next generation of automation is going to be, let's say, it makes current investments substantially non-competitive.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
So their competitors may be getting a jump on them in terms of implementing that next generation. Well, they've created their own barriers for them to transition to that.
So a bit too much too soon kind of situation, I suppose.
Too much too soon and not well thought through in terms of really doing the work to understand what that next generation of automation is going to require. Mm. Yeah. And building that infrastructure in place. You can't stop the clock.
Right.
People are still going to have to invest capital to grow their business and to improve their operations. What we're saying is do so very thoughtfully,
Right.
and not just in a traditional ROI that are looking just at head replacement in terms of manufacturing, but take a look at where the automation is going, and it's a strategic decision for a company. It isn't a tactical decision to make more, faster, better.
Right.
It is a strategic decision in terms of understanding where the world is headed and putting yourself in a position to take full advantage of that
Right.
and do it early and start that infrastructure in place. And as we discuss, we'll discuss a little bit later, that really creates a competitive moat around your business when done well.
Yeah.
And that's what we help our clients look through and shape their operations to do that.
So Dave, you've seen a lot of transformations. Can you tell us, how did you get into the strategic transformation space in the first place?
Well, it's a long story. And I've been doing this for truly a half century now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a North Dakota farm boy. So I grew up with greasy fingers and loved automation at that level, and carried it through to engineering degree and an MBA and all of that. And I had an opportunity to start my career working with General Electric Company, designing automation for production of lighting.
Okay, cool.
And so I went through a lot of different cycles. So I've had a chance since starting my own practice in the early 90s to work with the full breadth of industry. Food and beverage, consumer packaged goods, automotive, first, second, and third tier, the coming of the e-commerce age, a lot of apparel companies in there. And I've been able to help them improve their operations, U.S. and Europe, Korea, China, a few operations around the world, and seen a lot in those 50 years.
Yeah, I can imagine. You've seen the whole evolution of this kind of go on.
And I've never seen anything like what's happening right now. Right now is an exciting time.
Yeah, such an interesting
It is
time
so
to be
much
alive.
fun.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
much fun.
Yeah.
It's got a knife's edge to it.
I was just going to say, a lot of people would disagree with you. A lot of people there's a lot of fear that is coming along with
Yep.
it. But I think that someone with your kind of expertise saying that this is exciting, I think should help quell some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not without risk. There's a knife's edge to it, as you pointed out. That one of my avocations yet as a younger person was skydiving. So there's an exhilaration to that. There's also a need to take caution and take care and plan for every step that you're going to take.
Yeah.
That first step out of the plane that's 12,000 feet up, that's a big step. So you plan for that carefully. And I think you have to plan for the transition to the next generation of automation just as carefully.
Yeah.
So can you share more about your background in leading automation initiatives? What kind of companies did you work with?
A broad based of different companies, both in manufacturing and distribution. I've always been talked about my roots was a greasy-fingered farm boy. It's always been on the physical side of it. When you create a product, when you touch a product, you move a product, pick a product, package a product, stack and ship the product. There's always been that kind of a physical part of what I get involved with. I'm not in any way a creator of data. I'm definitely a user of data. I demand good data. Any automation requires that data is the foundational element in success.
Right.
So, but the companies that we worked with, have been in taking a look at their business, doing a network analysis about what asset do they need where do they need a factory, where do they need a distribution center, where do they need a hub, where do they need a regional DC, what kind of architecture that their operation should take. And then once we work through that and define what that architecture looks like, describing what those assets are in terms of their operating capability of that particular asset. And then we would help them, if it's a greenfield or a brownfield project, acquire the location, the physical location, define what's required inside of that box and outside of that box to connect it to their company, and then help them find the various pieces that need to be put in there, whether it's conveyors or sorters or robots in today's world, and then have them identify the suppliers, select the suppliers, build a solution together, and then we're there all the way through the startup. And I talked about fun. That's what fun is. When you've got this idea in your head and you help a client through this selection.
Yeah, and it works.
And then you see it come up. It never works completely on day one. I wish.
Yeah.
Let's be real.
Yeah.
But very quickly, you get it to work. You get the wins. You get that momentum in the company. You walk out on the floor and people see that their lives have been improved by the automation that's going in.
I like that you're saying, it's improving people's lives, not just improving ROI, and it's like actually benefiting the employees as well. Yeah,
it is, and that's when it works the best.
Now, something we want to explore next is the automation trap. Obviously, automation sounds amazing: faster picking, fewer errors, better efficiency. But from your experience, why do automation projects make inventory accuracy worse instead of better?
Automation multiplies what it receives.
Okay.
And so the biggest trap that we've found is that organizations will automate their dysfunction rather than eliminate the dysfunction. They think that automation will fix the dysfunction. That's not what happens. Automation replicates that dysfunction faster and faster.
Yeah, so you mentioned messy data earlier. Let's multiply it.
You take the people out of it, and people are working at a pace, and they will see an anomaly, and they have a chance to cure it. But when that conveyor is moving at 3,600 cartons an hour, it's a lot of boxes. It can't recognize anomalies.
Right.
And so any errors that were there in that process are multiplied. And that goes both on the physical movement of the product and the data that is created with the movement of the product. So you have to have that addressed and designed before you go in. You have to have your processes clearly documented. You have to have the processes adhered to, so you know when you make a change, you can anticipate what the impact of that change will be. And that allows us to put automation in and have it successful after the normal startup bugs and getting it running and getting that life, getting to where life is fun.
Getting back to that place. So can you share some real world examples of maybe some initiatives that looked like great on paper, but then when you went to actually implement them, they just kind of flopped?
Yeah, I think that the one of the most common I've seen are companies that have gone out and bought a high-end warehouse execution system and put it in place. That phenomenon I just talked about happens in real time.
Right.
They start with poor data, and that WES executes perfectly, but it's simply the data that it's driving to is wrong.
Right.
Another common problem is people had put in very high-speed picking solutions, but they don't address what is happening on the inbound materials. So how the materials are received and how they're stored away is it's inconsistent by whatever their vendor has for packaging that week.
Right.
And all this automation that is designed for that particular case, and I mean a physical case of products,
Right.
starts to fall apart because you haven't addressed the full upstream requirements to make that solution a success.
Right. So creating like these choke points essentially in your processes.
Yes, it becomes a choke point quickly.
Yeah.
When I expected a 6x8 by 12 package, and it comes by 6x8 by 14, and the automation fails at that point.
Right.
Simply because you haven't worked through all the contingencies that are required to make that automation a success. Three different areas we'll talk about the most important one, which is data. Is that you have to have a full and accurate description of what the product is, its cube weight information, and many people look at that as well. I can fix that as we're putting in the automation and make that available when we turn it on. No. You have to have that at the point that you're doing a system design. And so the step one to do a good project is data up front, and that includes the inventory data, the inventory records. SKU master's got to be complete and accurate. And the processes have to be well defined and well documented. With those three prerequisites solved, then you have a chance for success. You have a lot of work to do to get there, but at least you're on a road that can be successfully transited at that point.
This next question is kind of leading, you kind of somewhat answered it already. Sounds like what you're saying that is that a lot of these, flashy systems, these AI automation, robots and all that aren't exactly the place where you get the biggest wins, I guess. So, you mentioned some things like data, for example. Is there any other prerequisites that you think that companies really need in order to see a successful transformation?
Well, there's the human side of it. We'll probably touch on this multiple points through here.
Yeah.
But the human side of it, you have to address the fear factor going in. And that exists on two different levels. The easiest to see is that of the operator on the floor. They're worried about the automation coming from their job.
Right.
The more consequential one that's harder to see is in the management. They often see that later decisions on a different form of automation is a critique of decisions that they've already made. And so they will be very dismissive of that next generation of automation because they see that as a challenge to the decisions that they have made.
Right.
That becomes the much more critical barrier that has to be overcome to be successful.
Right. So it's buy-ins from everyone, from employees to leadership to everyone needs to buy into this for it to work.
When you talk about the fear factor, those are the two different motivational elements, that we see the being displaced by the automation and also being critiqued in terms of the decisions that have been made by people in leadership positions.
Yeah, that makes sense because you have the employees who are much more hands-on, so they're obviously worried if something can do the thing that they can do, and then you have management who are their decisions are the ones that that's the thing that they're getting paid for. So it does really make sense.
I feel like when people hear the word automation, sometimes they immediately think replacement. But in reality, how do these roles evolve when automation is implemented well?
There's a shift with automation. It's not a displacement, but it's a shift in the roles. And what we see is that it shifts from a physical to more of a supervisory role.
Okay.
And a lot of times it's supervising systems in pieces of equipment instead of doing the jobs, physically with their hands. That picker that used to walk 8 miles a day, is all of a sudden now supervising that automated picking system.
Right.
They're looking at data, they're looking at trends, they're using their experience in that operation to make sure that the next level of automation is successful in completing the task, because they know that task needs to be be
Yeah,
Right,
it's like
right.
delegating the work to the robots, the automation, and then just make sure
The work that we don't want to do.
And on the management and supervisory side, there was always these people that are central to an organization that knew in their gut what had to happen. The organization is always vulnerable to those people because what happens when they take a vacation day or they get sick?
Right.
Their roles are shifting as well. They are now having the benefit of a lot of analytical information generated by that automation delivered to them. So it changes their role substantially.
Right.
Yet it makes their role replicable, if you will, in terms of you're not relying on an individual's gut, but you've got an operation that is generating the data that can be reviewed by people and responded to and acted upon in making sure that the organization is successful day in and day out, producing or distributing or packaging and shipping whatever is on the schedule and what the needs are on that day. And that's a pretty dramatic difference, sometimes threatening. Some people have gotten into very senior roles because their gut has been better.
Right.
And they see that as a threat. But what we have to do is work with management teams to let them know that is really enriching their lives. It gives them tools to move to the next level in terms of what their contributions are to the organizations, to the people that work for them, that they're providing a stable work environment, they're providing stability in terms of upstream management, in terms of what they're going to produce and the costs that it'll be produced. Companies that invest in management will see a compounding return on their investments in automation.
Yeah.
So it's just not the staff. It's the management, and their skills in management approaches have to be adapted as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's actually what you're saying is mirroring a lot of what we've been hearing from past guests as well. When we talk about these new technologies, is I think there's this fear that they're going to be replacing people, but it seems to be that they're just kind of enhancing and giving us more freedom to do better, to optimize our workflows, which is really cool.
That's what the industry has seen. 2 or 3 quarters after the automation comes in, you interview the people that have been involved in that transition, and it's almost universally viewed as a very positive change in their working lives. And it can typically be very visible in terms of the business performance, which is also a critical element in the security of the people that are working in that organization.
Yeah, it's probably like a little bit of a learning curve, but once you get it, it's worth it.
Yeah, for sure.
So next up, we're going to talk about something a little futuristic, but I'm sure everyone's curious about.
I know I am.
Humanoid robots. So from your perspective, how realistic is this technology in the next 2 to 5 years?
Very real. A lot of the world out there looks at it as a 10-year horizon.
Yeah.
And it's not a 10-year horizon.
Oh,
It's
wow.
closer than we think.
Yeah.
It's here today. I mean, I was in Spartanburg, Virginia, South Carolina, not too long ago, at the BMW plant there, where they've had figure robots in there for more than a year, have now produced 30,000 vehicles with their contribution.
Wow.
So robots are real.
Yeah.
I mean, the first ever recorded use of a humanoid robot was GXO Logistics, and that's in 2024.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this is something that's real today, and it's operating today. The question to be posed and to be investigated by management is, in my industry, when is it going to become economically viable? And that's coming fast.
Yeah.
As Melinda noted on front, these machines are predicted to be in a $40,000 variety, highly capable at $40,000
Wow.
within 2 years.
That is incredible. That's the price of a car. It's it's cheaper than a lot of cars.
It's
to be
operating
honest.
under $8 an hour, like way
Yeah.
below minimum wage.
I mean, below minimum wage, I think you're gonna get a lot of owners and operators
Yeah.
very curious about that fact for sure.
And this is a point off the curve. There's nothing that I've seen like this in industrial automation ever. And that is the crossover with the consumer. The humanoid robots are predicted to live both in factories and distribution centers and also in people's homes.
Yeah, we saw the one at the
Yeah,
people's
and-
home.
and-
Be Neo, I think,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
something it's called. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
They do like their laundry or dishes.
It's there today. Yeah, you can buy them today. The early results that I've seen have resulted in a lot of funny YouTube videos.
Yeah, we know someone that bought
Where
one
they-
too.
Yeah.
But if you compare to where they're at today versus just a few months ago,
Yeah.
the change is tremendous. And so I'm a believer. I really see that the projections that are being made will occur. Now, the difference between what we've seen before and what we're seeing in this version of automation is that KUKA, which is a manufacturer of robots, may produce a few tens of thousands of their automated mobile robots. Great machine. We're using them right now on a client site.
Yeah. Okay.
The difference is that's a few tens of thousands. Humanoid robots, they're not talking tens of thousands. They're not talking millions. They're not talking 100 millions. They're talking billions of these machines in the future.
Oh, geez, that's like they are gonna.
I'll take over.
They're gonna. Yeah, there's gonna be more of them than us eventually. It sounds like.
Some predictions are that there will be 1.x robots to humans
Oh, wow.
really?
in the
Okay.
future. that there will be more than one. Some predictions. That's not
Yeah.
my
Right.
prediction, but there are some very knowledgeable people making those kind of predictions. Good indicator right now.
Yeah.
There is a large manufacturing plant in Newark, California. I was just out there looking. I could see it from my hotel window. That is being converted in part to producing these humanoid robots.
Wow.
I mean, and this is a very large factory.
Yeah.
So when people that are designing and manufacturing these machines are making those kind of capital investments, they know something that we don't know.
Yeah.
But to the point that I was making, that it makes this different than KUKA's robots, is that at those kind of volumes, you will see costs that are in a different plateau than you see in industrial equipment. It will be closer to consumer goods costing than industrial machinery costing. And that $40,000, I think, will fall quickly. At the $40,000 level, that translates into roughly an $8 an hour operating cost for a humanoid robot.
Wow.
Yeah.
You compare that to in North America, the typical person working in a warehouse is $22 to $35 an hour US. $8 an hour versus 22 to 35. If you were in a business and you had to compete with someone who had that level of resource, I think you would be threatened if you don't put yourself on a plateau with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think it's an existential threat to businesses that lag in these investments.
Right. So
So
this
deep.
isn't really optional. You need to start adopting these
Yeah.
things now, you know?
Yeah, I mean, when they're economically available, we're talking about projections here.
Right, right.
But one of the things that I see is that a lot of senior management in companies look at this as a projection, something to monitor. I don't think that that's the stance.
Right.
It is something to be recognized and prepared for.
Yeah.
And that's when we talk about the HRQ, that's really what that is. It says recognizing what that will be and what we can do today to prepare for it, what we can be doing today to build the infrastructure to make that transition successful. And as I mentioned earlier, the early adopters are going to create a competitive moat that's substantial.
Right.
So can you talk about what do humanoids excel in compared to fixed automation systems?
The fixed automation systems does not go away because it's very good at highly repetitive, standardized tasks. So if you're producing a flat of beer and stacking it on a pallet, that is a great use case for automation,
Right.
fixed automation. But if you are in a downstream with a beer distribution, and now you've got to the point you got to create a delivery for a customer, you know, especially with the arrival of something I love, which is the craft beers.
Yeah.
Now instead of just 10 or 20 SKUs, you could give hundreds of SKUs to a very small customer. But that customer is, like all customers, is extremely important. And you multiply that by the number of craft beer retail distribution points. It's important for the companies to be able to service them. Now that fixed automation needs to take a little bit different turn and handle layer pick as well as is full case picks. It has to handle different form factors in terms of bottles and cans and in specialized bottles. It has to handle multiple different SKUs in terms of special labeling for World Cup, whatever is coming. And that is where robotic automation really creates a whole different plateau of capability.
Yeah.
It can react and build. It could react to that new SKU coming on tomorrow. And it can build that customer order to that's highly specialized need of that particular craft beer beer
So
distributor.
The adaptability
Yeah.
seems just insane.
And another major advantage is that when that one distribution center trains their robot in that, robots have truly a hive mind. You teach that robot in that one distribution center that skill, they can immediately transfer it to all its compatriot distribution points.
Wow.
And so there's no site-by-site programming and promulgation of that learning. It's nearly instantaneous when you have that automation platform in place. That's what needs to be prepared today.
Yeah, that is very cool.
Building all the intelligence.
So something actually you mentioned earlier was, a lot of CapEx is being spent right now on these new systems and whatnot. And if companies continue to invest in these rigid systems without actually thinking about, the future of AI and automation, there's a chance that later on down the line, they're going to have these systems that are kind of just really expensive, or maybe just like it's not even really possible to adapt them. So, how real would you say that this risk is, and how significant is it?
I think it's the most significant capital risk today.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of people that are making investments right now, and I see some of these investments, and I know that they're made based on good, solid ROI projections. Mm-hmm. Those ROI projections are based on what is happening today and what his history has been.
Right.
They don't necessarily recognize what is going to be. So there will come a time when they look at that investment and they say that we need to change that investment. It needs to be adapted because we're seeing a higher rate of change in the products. We've seen a different demand from the consumers that we're fulfilling for variability and certainly for speed. And so the current fixed equipment becomes a barrier because it's very good at what you design that task at the start, but it's not adaptable to these changing situations.
Right.
And the competition is ready to jump in and do that. So you're going to have to change your operation to do that, but you have already expended a fair amount of capital putting in that fixed automation. So that point-to-point conveyor system, that high-speed sorter on a ship dock that's now a monument that blocks all the autonomous mobile robots that you might have used. That becomes a barrier instead of providing the competitive cost structures.
Right.
It becomes a barrier to the functionality that you need to be meeting your customers' needs today.
So are there any areas where you would say that humanoid robots should just not be used in yet?
Yes, there's a number of them. I mean, these are technical areas where they have not been fully addressed at this point in time. If you have an explosive environment, they're not certified yet for a no arcing situation.
Right.
We've had clients who, in the automotive industries that are preparing the mini explosives that go into your airbags. And we had to be very careful with the equipment that we put into that production environment to make sure that there was no chance that they would create an explosion, an explosive situation. Robots are not yet certified there. There are some clean room environments where there may be some lubricants or other contaminants that would come off a humanoid robot that's not certified for that yet.
Okay.
There are some, but I think those are being looked at as we speak.
Right.
And it won't be too long before those are resolved as well. But at this point in time, I would in those two particular situations, I would look for a bridging situation, putting in place solutions that don't preclude the adoption of the humanoid robots, but meet your current production requirements.
Okay. So, I mean, I never thought I'd say this, but for operators who don't have the budget for a humanoid robot this year, what do you think are some easy wins that they should just do anyway? No regret moves that they can get some ROI or get something from it? Number
one is communications, I think. You can put in the current Wi-Fi 6E and build the infrastructure, because the communications is going to be critical. There's some infrastructural things in terms of the facility itself. What are the specifications for the floor? There's certain requirements for flatness that is best suited for robots. Humans can adapt around, but robots make their lives more difficult as well.
Right.
if you don't meet those requirements. There's aisle width requirements, there's clearance requirements, head clearances. Review your facility to make sure that you're not creating barriers that will preclude the adoption in that way. Build the infrastructure where you need it and can use that infrastructure today, and the Wi-Fi communications one is critical. Another element is communications to the robot itself. So any capital equipment that you're looking at, number one on that list is to ask that potential supplier, do you have an API in place that's an industry standard? And then when they say, I have to get back to you on that, or that's a red flag. And even if they do say, yes, we have an API in place, get the receipts on it. Get it verified. APIs themselves can be a variable feast, if you will. So ask for a REST API.
Okay.
Or better yet, a RESTful API, where all 5 criteria for a RESTful API have been met. And then be critical and take the time to go out for a site visit just to confirm it.
Right.
We've had a number of unfortunate situations where they were very effusive about the capabilities, and then we find when we started up that we had some gaps. So we've learned as well, and that's what we do. We learn, and we make our learning available to our clients.
Yeah.
Those are good tips.
So do you think that some leadership is still kind of underestimating just how fast these things are progressing?
Yes, there is that. I find management today is very well educated. I mean, they've read the articles, they watch the YouTubes, they've seen the Boston Dynamics robot doing the backflips.
Yes.
Very impressive. And they put it on the shelf and say, geez, I have to monitor that. No, you have to prepare for that.
Yeah.
You have to be active in that. And so it's that switch from academic learning, curiosity, even when they spent the time to get to know the detail, to turn the corner and say, this is not just an academic exercise. This is a planning exercise, and active. I have to become active in this space. I have to provide leadership to my organization.
Yeah.
I have to move the organization to be effective in the implementation of these tools. And as I mentioned earlier, in many cases, it's going to be an existential issue. It's a strategic issue. It is not an academic issue. Work today. So
Right. So Dave, through this conversation, we've talked a lot about, these rigid automation systems, messy data, maybe processes that just don't hold up with the real world variability kind of thing. So which actually brings us to the Human Readiness Quotient, HRQ, I believe it's called. And can you maybe give the listeners maybe a high level overview of what is HRQ?
yeah, it's 5 equally rated dimensions that we look at.
Okay.
And so these dimensions are made to be looked at not in place of a traditional ROI type of investment analysis, but in augmentation to that analysis. And we look at each one of those 5, and we score them from 1 to 10. And we use an aggregate, an average of the aggregate scores to help guide what investments that we make or advise our clients to make.
Okay.
When a company is being scored, what are the core dimensions that are being evaluated?
Number 1 is APIs. That the data interoperability with the rest of the environment is the most critical.
Okay.
But the second one is physical, that we talked about already, in terms of you got to be able to fit the machine in place and have it survive its environments comfortably and productively. Third one is task modularity. You have to look at your production process. We talked about the need for clearly defined production processes and adherence to those processes. We're also characterizing that in terms of what type of processes that we're putting in place. Are those processes modular, or is it monolithic?
Right.
The best way to introduce the humanoid robot in production is not going to be end-to-end process. It's usually going to be in a segment of that process flow.
Right.
So that modularity, how can we create a process to where we can take one segment of that process and put in a humanoid robot when it's available cost effectively to handle that step in the process.
Okay.
So it's a different philosophy that has to be looked at when you're designing the processes themselves in terms of its modularity instead of being a truly monolithic process. Other elements include the data environment that it's going to be sitting in. Does it generate the data, the rich data that really is required to train an AI-enabled humanoid robot during its introduction and utilization? So that data environment is something that we're structuring at the start. What we're looking for when we talk to clients that provide things is there a data model of your solution? Is that already available to us? So we can have a 3D model built in and have that part of what they supply to us, so they can simulate that, link it into the humanoid learning tree during the implementation. The fifth one, and it's one we talked about already, but it's probably the most critical one, is your organization ready to make that transition? Are the people open to the change? And when I say the people in your organization, I'm talking about the people that work in operations as well as in the back office, from the operations and the management structure of the operations. Those things that we talked about in terms of addressing the replacement fear,
Yeah.
in terms of we're not going to replace, we're going to enhance your working career.
Right.
In terms of management, we need you to take the leadership. We need you to do the work to understand how this will impact your organization and how you need to prepare your organization for this transition and lead in that, and without any hangover fear. You've got to
Yeah.
create the environment.
That mindset shift.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of some of the decisions that have been made in the past is the past, and we're going to move forward from here. And building that core belief that transits from the people of the floor to the people in the suites, office suites. When everyone is seeing a consistent vision of the benefits and the requirements for this critical change, that's when it's going to be successful. And that people are always the most. And the technology is great.
Yeah.
One of the things that drove us into this is looking at projects that have been successful and some that have been very successful. The difference between them is not in the technology itself. The technology can be the same, but it's the infrastructure that's made available to that technical solution. And that infrastructure is the data, the process definition, and the organizational acceptance for that. It's not the technology in itself. Technology can be made to work.
Right.
The rest of the infrastructure, which management has to create, is the difference between an okay project and a spectacular project.
Yeah. What does the evaluation process look like in practice?
In practice, it's a small addition to the analysis that are done with the traditional analysis of being the return on investment or net present value or whatever a company tends to use. It's 10 to 15%, maybe as high as 20% of the total time that's in there. And what we're doing is we're looking at the specs and looking at the enhancements to the specifications for that HRQ successful integration. We're not only looking at that, we're also looking at the contractual extensions that will be required to assure that you get the performance that was sought when you made the commitment with the client. And this is proven successful. Then once we get this put in place and we start running the HRQ process, we've been able to avoid some costly errors. And that's one of the real benefits that we're seeking on this, to make sure that the fit is there when we do make the investment. And so by turning away from those process options that preclude the inevitable transition to humanoid robotics, I think that we've really done a great service to our clients. And some of these clients are now starting to make this transition to robotics as we speak. We have some that are got clients that is producing in a distribution center 4 different types of robots successfully integrated to fulfill distribution of some very large capital equipment projects. That's so new I can't even talk to the company at this point in time. We're still under the binders of the NDA. Okay, so they had a particular situation where they had a goods to persons that really had a very high ROI, but that goods to person required conveyor systems. It required some barriers, if you will, to the movement of transit to humanoid robotics. And so we were able to come up with a solution that met current needs without creating the barriers. And so now we've created a path for that successful transition to the humanoid robotics that was otherwise going to be closed. And so the HRQ process, I think in that particular case, was a great success in terms of avoiding pitfall. In a very early utilization that we were able to identify and put into place the capital equipment that has the APIs in place, which was not their first choice. We were able to guide the choice based on the HRQ result, put in place the selection of equipment with the APIs built in, and I can say that today they're being ecstatic with the results in terms of when they are starting to introduce the robots, the ease to which they can generate and transmit the information that's sent to the robots, and that they can receive confirmation information back from that robotic environments to make sure that they meet their production requirements. So
That's
it's something that we're ecstatic about.
Yeah.
Rightfully so.
Can you give one example where traditional ROI said yes, but the HRQ would have said, maybe let's slow down?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think the example I gave is a really good one.
Yeah.
I mean, because that one was showed a very high ROI. So it said go. It said go. And we said, wait a minute. Let's not look at tomorrow. Let's look out. Let's look out just a short time in the future, and see what the impact of that decision is going to be. And we were able to say, look, here's what it's going to cost you at that point in time to do this next generation of automation that we can see coming. This is what it will cost you to introduce, because you would have to rearrange all that. You'd have to break apart the processes. You would have to move those physical barriers that were put in place. You would have to grow the APIs that aren't there to get the information required to operate these machines. Here's an alternative, and it was actually a few percentage more in cost going in. Just a 10 or 15% more investment for the bridging operation that created not walls around a process, but a foundation for the next plateau of capability that the humanoid robotics will bring.
Right. So how would you say that HRQ actually mitigates some of the automation traps that we were talking about earlier?
It identifies where the barriers will be created.
Right.
And this is, the barriers can be physical, the barriers can be operational in terms of the way the process is designed, the barriers can be data flow in terms of the where the information is coming from and going to, in the form that that information takes, whether or not it's real time enough to fit the needs of the operations.
Right.
And so all of that is considered going in during the HRQ process. And so by testing alternative scenarios against that HRQ background, against what are the demands that the HRQ makes in terms of what will be successful. That's how you build the platform. You know, it's really a shame you see companies that are, as I described, spending this huge amounts of capital doing what they think is going to be this foundational element for the next level of capability. And they get down the road and find out that they haven't built a foundation, they built a wall, a barrier.
Right.
And so the HRQ process assures that situation doesn't occur.
Right.
That we really look to that next generation and we build that platform and help them transition successfully to the next generation.
If we were to apply this to the real world, which industries would the HRQ be the most valuable in?
In the real world, this is going to be in the discrete manufacturing industries, you know, where you've got discrete items. In process manufacturing, there may be elements where there would be for dangerous environments or something like that you can put in humanoid robotics into it. But typically, it's going to be a discrete where you're moving lots of small parts, lots of physical elements, and that's the way that I would characterize the requirements, which is when you take a look at that very general description of what that operation environments look like, you know, you're throwing a very broad net over almost all of the industry in the U.S. So there's very few areas that would be excluded from the benefits of this type of analysis. In terms of where this can be applied, I think it's almost universally.
No, that's awesome. That's what
Yeah.
everyone wants to hear. Yeah.
So for leaders who are evaluating their next automation projects, what's a simple way for them to run a quick HRQ assessment?
Well, there's those 5 elements that we talked about
Yeah.
in terms of going in there and taking, interviewing every one of their potential equipment suppliers, finding out about the API and the characteristics of that API, and proving that they have that API available. So that's one of the areas. Taking a look at their processes, evaluating it for the modularity of the processes themselves. Take a look at their data, assuring that the inventory data is accurate and complete, that the parts master is clean and correct, and that they have that operational links for data collection to their operating environment, so they have that real-time data feedback from that. So go through all of those 5 steps and come up with an evaluation that where they can see that they're creating that fertile seed bed for humanoid robotics to take root in.
Right.
You know, and if they want an externally validated set, they can also talk to STAs. So we would love to help them through that process.
Yeah, so I suppose they got to be honest with themselves, and that's where you guys come in to make sure that they are being honest with their assessment.
Well, I mean, as a consultant,
Yeah.
we've got to be very humble.
Right.
I mean, there is no way that we're, as a consultant, will ever know a client's operations and like they know their operations. One thing about being a consultant is that, as I mentioned earlier, that the 50 years experience that we have, that I have personally, is I've seen a lot of things. And so that's an advantage that I have that most people in operations don't have. So it's the combination of those two that is really powerful. Your detailed understanding of what your operation requirements, combined with that external viewpoint of someone in some organization that have seen multiple varied implementations that can really give you options that you may not have identified before. That's where the power comes from. Together, we work through this HRQ process, looking at where the next generation of automation is coming from. And we create a strategy, how to bridge from here to the next generation. We do that early. We do that so that at the day that they become of cost available to our operation, they become implemented, and you will get an 18 to 24-month jump on competitors.
Wow.
By doing that analysis, doing that preparation work today. And in that, we will lay out a plan that goes step by step to arrive to that future. So we will not take a giant leap. We will take a number of incremental steps, each tested for its capability, each with its own built-in ROI. Mm-hmm. So we're not extending capital before it can pay back.
Yeah, very responsible way of going about it, I'd say.
and build step by step to build that future capability that will make you a leader in your industry.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And that's our objective.
Yeah. So we're going to close the episode. We're going to zoom out a little bit and talk about, the future. I feel like we've already kind of been talking about the future a lot. The future is here. Yeah. So maybe talk more about today. But yeah, maybe can you describe what a humanoid hybrid warehouse actually looks like in the real world?
That's an excellent lead-in. I mean, because it's most people look at and have this anime version of what this factory of the future looks like.
Yeah.
The factory of the future is going to look a lot like today's factory.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of fixed automation endpoints so you've got high volume repetitive processes, and it's built for that, it's optimized for that, and it'll perform those tasks very successfully. Mm-hmm. But it will be, as you pointed out, a hybrid operation. So you'll have those elements in there, but wherever in your process you have that need for variability, for rapid change, that's where the humanoid robots will add that critical capability.
Right.
We did a project recently at a tier one supplier to electronic vehicle automotive manufacturing in the Bay Area recently. One of the things that shocked me, I go back with the automotive industry, back to the 80s when I was working with Ford Motor Company on their PN1 platform introduction. Okay. That dates me. This will date me as well. That Jetson view, I don't know, there's a cartoon systems that dates me as well. Anyway, Jetson view of what this warehouse looks like, it's really going to be a hybrid. You're going to have fixed automation that is performing the task that fixed automation does well. And you'll have humanoid robots supporting that, handling the variability that comes in. And variability takes a number of different forms. I've had the opportunity to do a project for a tier one manufacturer for a supplier to the automotive industries in the Bay Area recently. And the thing that shocked me is the rate of engineering change orders that they were bombarded with. Back in the 80s in the Ford and ECO, we're talking about 6 to 9 months to make a change in a production facility. Wow. They were getting multiple change requests per week where the expected horizon was a week out.
Oh my God, wow, okay.
Unbelievable. I mean, it is in the area, in the world of fixed automation, that's impossible. That is, you cannot make those changes that rapidly. That is specifically what a robotic solution can provide. And again, if you got multiple parallel production lines, if you teach the robots on one production line, it's instantly promulgated across all of them. So there are some huge advantages that are not visible from a traditional measurement that are absolutely critical in terms of the capabilities they provide to organizations. We're not talking about units per hour, how many seconds to perform this operation. We're talking about the ability to implement change to the operation at a rate that's unparalleled in industrial history.
Right.
So this factory or this distribution center is not going to look that dramatically different, but it's going to be operating in a whole different plateau of capability.
Wow. That's really impressive, actually, because you think of assembly lines are very much a fixed thing. It sounds like you're saying that we can just kind of switch things out and change these assembly lines to create different products with, like you always said 9-12 months into like a week.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive, squeezing that down for sure. I want to talk a little bit about the virtuous cycle of adoption. Can you kind of maybe explain to the listeners what exactly that means and how it kind of relates to companies who are kind of implementing these new advanced automations?
Yeah. That's one of the strongest dynamics that is happening in this space, that virtuous cycle. And that's where you do an implementation, and that implementation in the process of being deployed and employed will start generating the returns that feed forward in terms of the next generation of implementation, the next step. So in terms of humanoid robotics in a generic sense, they're employed, they're deployed, proving that they're worth an operation. Their volume goes up, and their volume goes up. Coincident with that volume going up, the capability will go up as well as the manufacturers produce greater volumes of these. They will find the place in their design cycle to improve its capabilities. And so as the volume goes up, the capability goes up, the number of potential applications for that tool will grow. Every time that tool is employed, there will be learning that feeds back into that product development cycle. And so volumes go up, the costs go down again. The costs go down again. It can be deployed in more circumstances. More learning comes in, redefines the product, increases the volume of the product, further decreasing the cost. And you get this virtuous cycle of improvement in capabilities, expansion in terms of numbers of units produced, which reduces the cost of it, which is, it makes it more applicable to a larger range of tasks. And
Just
it
Snowball.
keeps going.
It never stops.
Yeah, and it is a snowball. If you're sitting at the bottom of the hill and the snowball's coming at you, you've got to. And I think that's happening to a lot of companies today.
Just get hit by the snowball and wrapped up into it. You're part of the cycle.
Yeah, they want to be the ones that are creating the snowballs and pushing them down the hill.
Yeah.
They don't want to be down at the bottom of the hill.
Yeah,
trying to
Indiana
get around.
Jonesing away from the snowball. And that's a wrap for today's episode. I want to thank Dave again for coming and having this great conversation. It is just as interesting as I thought it was going to be. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dave. We learned a lot about common automation pitfalls, humanoid robots, and how the HRQ framework can really prepare your business. And before we let you go, can you tell our listeners where can they go to find you and stay connected with you?
Yeah, our website is www.xform.me. XForm, as you might know, is engineering shorthand for transform.
Oh, okay.
So
Nice.
transform me. So if you just reach out to me at there, david.kilzer@xform.me, that would be the best way to get in touch with me.
Perfect. And we will leave the links for that
Yeah.
down in the description for everybody. And if you like this episode, please give us a 5-star review, comment, like, subscribe, do all the things, and stay tuned. We're going to have many more guests like David on to talk all things inventory, automation, all the good stuff. So thanks again, everybody.
And we'll see you all next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.